Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Help for HDTV. We are back for part two of our show with Ashley talking about end of life. And if you missed part one, you can go right back to the video before, or we'll link the video below in the description so you guys can watch part one of this story to learn a little bit about Ashley and Timothy and how they met and their story and their journey prior to what we are going to talk about now. And now we're going to talk about end of life. So, in the first part one, Ashley talks about lots of weight loss, maybe some confusion and delusions a little bit, wanting to go. I'm anxious, very anxious. It sounds like maybe like she talked about pacing turned into walking in circles. He was nervous about his weight loss, it seemed like, had a lot of anxiety. So take us, Ashley, to now. You were saying how you left our last show was people say that he would have been bedridden, he would have had sores, I would have dealt with this and this. And then
hmm
you stopped the show by saying my husband was still walking.
Yeah,
So take us now from he was walking to what happened over the next couple of weeks.
we had an incident, I would say a couple days before I actually took him to the ER. Another moment where he just wanted to leave and he was angry. It's more anger I've ever seen in my life. I've never seen him so angry and just adamant of wanting to do something. And this is really hard for me to talk about because it's not a picture that I want to paint for anyone, but I just want people to know this is something I wasn't prepared for. He tried to leave again, so I went and placed myself in front of the door. And he grabbed me by the neck and he tried to pull me. He grabbed me by my arm and it hurt. And he tried to pull me. So finally I just got out of the way and I said, if you want to leave, you leave. I said, just leave. I can't do this. So eventually he ended up going back to the bed. He calmed down and I just went to lay down on the couch. That made him even nervous because as long as he has been sick, we have still managed to sleep in the same bed. I know that sounds so crazy, but we have managed to do it. We took a lot of pillows, but we've done it. That night, he started doing what I call a rocking sensation. It was like he just would rock. And so he would try to put his feet down, but his feet would come out from underneath him. So they would cause him to go back. And it was just, he kept doing it. I kept saying, let me get you up, let me get you up. And then I just happened to go down because the cover had failed. So I was trying to keep the cover up. And next thing I know, that foot came out and popped me in the face. And it knocked me down to the ground. And I cried. I'm not going to lie, I cried. But it scared the living daylights out of him. It really did. But at the same time, he wasn't, it's like he was scared, but then he wasn't aware that he even done it at the moment at the same time. And my daughter happened to come in and she thought, was he hitting? I just said he hit me. So she thought he was like hitting, but he wasn't hitting. He was not aware of what he did. He really wasn't. So, and what people don't understand is, and I know this is a lot, and I even told the doctor, this all started from 5 o'clock the day before till this is now 6 o'clock in the morning the next day. My husband had 3 Xanax. My husband had his Depakote that he took. He had every scheduled medicine that he took. He had a total of 10 Trazodones. Nothing was making him sleep. And so this was our process, is like the medicine was no longer working. And I was communicating this with the doctors, but when they seen us on Zoom or whatever it may be, they only see that what they had seen on there. They were, because of the Austedo, they can only increase so little at so time. You know what I mean? Like a little bit in the medicine time due to side effects. And I understood that. We've been patient, we were trying it. And what was so crazy about that day, I was supposed to go into work the next couple of days, but I just told work I couldn't come because I had a big bruise on my face. I just was embarrassed at the same time. And I finally got a hold of the doctors, but Timothy was calm the next 2 days. He was calm. He was still. His movements weren't that bad. It's like the medicine was working. So I was like, what's going on? I'm so confused about what is going on. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, I'd already talked to my daughter and I said, I don't think he's going to live past 2024. I said, I feel like maybe the summer, the rate he was losing weight. And I finally looked at him when he was calm and I said, come on, we're going to get on the scale. I set the walker up, put the scale. My husband weighed 130 pounds. My husband weighed 170 a year before that. So that right there told me. And I looked at him and I got down to his face and I said, you're losing weight. I don't think you're going to live past 2024. And he looked at me and he said, I know. And I said, what do you want to do? And he said, call the doctors. So when I finally got a hold of a nurse at UAB, she was like, you're going to have to call an ambulance. We'll call one for you, whatever it may be. I said, no, we're not doing that. I know my husband, he's going to get combative. I'm not going to do it. I'm just not. They said, well, he may have an infection. Something could be coming on that could be causing these symptoms because he's going from very combative, very upset, mad to we had 2 calm days. So maybe just medicine needs to be changed. So I got him dressed. Me and my daughter walked him to the car. I drove him to the ER.
And he told you, yes, he's communicating with you, talking.
Yes. Yeah. I drove him to the ER. And when I got pulled up to the ER, I looked at the security guard and one of the people that help wheel people in and out. And I said, don't approach my car fast, but I need a wheelchair. I said, my husband has Huntington's. I said, if he is not in control of the situation, he will get combative. And we don't need that right now. Of course, at this time, waiting in, you know how ER waiting rooms are. It's awful. It takes forever. And I get it. It's a long wait or whatever, but he was moving a lot. He was sweating a lot. That's one thing we dealt with the whole disease. He excessively sweated. So he was sweating. There was one point that I was either leaned over him like this, trying to just help control his movements. I was taking his shoes off. I was putting blankets on. Whatever I had to do, I was doing. And then finally looked at this lady and I said, we need to get him in a bed. And I don't care if he does not have a room yet, but he needs to be laying down. He needs to get relaxed. I said, if not, he's about to fall on the floor. And she said, I'm not a nurse. And I said, that's not my problem. I said, you're an employee here. And finally, a lady who was waiting to be seen looked at her and said, I have been watching her battle this with her husband, what's going on with him right now, for almost 30 minutes. You cannot call the nurse that you were just chit-chatting with. Mm. And so finally that lady got up and went and got a nurse. And then she come over and then they basically ended up getting him a bed or whatever. And then that lady that helped me, and I told her, I said, I don't know who you are. I don't know if I ever see you again. I said, but thank you. And she said, I just want you to know you're doing an amazing job. And then I broke crying, of course. So once we get into the room, we get in the ER, I talked with the doctor. He's, of course, and he point blank told me, we were taught about Huntington's, but not enough. This is what the ER doctor told me, the one that was on call. He said, so I'm not going to sit here and tell you I know everything. He said, you're going to be able to tell me more about this disease than I probably know right now. Mm-hmm. And so I gave him the gist of everything, told him everything. And Timothy was in this bed. He was moving, getting up. He had those spastic movings, that rocking sensation I was talking about, where he was rocking and things. And eventually my husband wore himself down so much because he was tired. He was soaking wet. I had to take all of his clothes off of him. And he was just exhausted because the medicine he had was just not working anymore. Finally, a doctor come in and he goes, I need to know what your plan is. What is y'all's plan? And he looked at Timothy, looked at me, and I said, what are you talking about? What's your plan? And I said, we're here to see if he has an infection. I said, I need to know what's going on. This is what UAB told me to do. He said, his lungs are clear. He said, but what's your plan? And I said, what? And he said, hospice. And I started crying. And then he said, my best friend died from Huntington's. They called me in. He said, I helped take care of him. And he said, he's at the end. And I said, but he's not bedridden. He's walking. And he said, I understand. And so we basically get a room. this point. I've called my family. We're preparing to do hospice at home, to be honest with you. That's like what we're preparing to do, because he said he wanted to die at home. That's one thing I always ask him. He said he didn't want to be in a nursing home and he wanted to die at home. So that's what we started preparing for. So within a day and a half, I had already had scheduled to have the hospital bed, everything done. We finally got him calm enough to do a swallow study, and he had the x-rays and all that stuff. And another doctor came in that was on call for the week for that day. And then he got a talking to us, and then he gets a phone call because we're waiting to see if we're going to get released or if we're going to be in there a little longer. And I just got to figure out what's going on. And he gets a phone call, and he comes back in and he says, change your plans. And I said, what is that? And he said, he can't go home. And I said, why? And he said, he failed his swallow study. And he said, we cannot figure out what kind of medicines he needs. And we've been there for about 5-6 hours at this point. They had given my husband Valium, put him to sleep for 15 minutes. They gave him morphine, put him to sleep for a good hour, gave it to him again. He went to sleep for 15 minutes. He tried how to say it, but did not work, didn't even do anything. And the doctor said, we're trying all these medicines right now, nothing's working. And he said, and if I send him home, we're going to have to wait on those medicines. We have to wait the next day for somebody to come out. And so we're talking, and I looked at him, and he said, we had already applied for the hospice there with the hospital in case if we did have to send him back, we had a bed immediately. So we were already set up with our hospice. And so I looked at Timothy and I said, what do you want to do? And he said, I want to stay here. I don't want to go home. And then he looked at me and he says, because she has to go home. And I cried because he was thinking about me. And I think he was right. I wouldn't have been able to come back home when he died here. I really would, because it's what I'm going through now. We're staying in there, of course, and we had to wait basically a couple more hours. And you got to understand, through the process of just being in that room waiting to go to hospice, my husband has not slept almost 24, almost 48. I'm going on 72 hours. He's not slept. If he did sleep, it was 15 minutes to an hour. So he had not slept. And I had not slept because constantly my name was being called. When we finally get to hospice, it was honestly, it was amazing. The hospice care, what these nurses did was amazing. Between being in the ER, being in that room, and then going to hospice, I had so many nurses come and talk to us, wanting to know about our story, our love story, wanting to know about how I took care of him, wanting to know about the disease, wanting to be taught about the disease. Like, they've heard about it. They had only had one other HD patient on that hospice floor, and it was actually juvenile Huntington's, and it had been a while. So not everybody there had a patient or had that specific patient, but they had heard the stories and they knew. I was up with him, and it seemed like when I was ready to go to bed late at night, that's when he wanted to be up. He would look at me and he would say, my legs hurt. His legs were in such pain. I would rub his legs to my hands. They had him like on a soft meat diet, but he couldn't swallow no more. Like, he could not swallow it. Like, it's like he forgot how to eat it. It's like it was like he forgot. So this food was coming in and he wasn't eating it. And then I finally looked at them and I said, can we just put him like on a soft diet, like pudding and things of that nature? So he kept asking for peanut butter. Even though he didn't eat, he wanted peanut butter. So I took peanut butter and I mixed it in with whipped cream. And so he lived off of peanut butter and whipped cream for about 2 days. He was in there for about 2 days and he was actually urinating on his own. But then about the third day, he did not urinate on his own. So they had to do a catheter. And so that right there told me that why is it going so fast? And when I asked him that, I'm like, what's happening? His body is starting to shut down. He's losing function of his muscles and things of that nature. But he could tell you he had to pee, but he just physically couldn't do it. I eventually had to get to where he could drink some tea. It was just a little bit of tea. He'd drink tea, fine. But of all things, he wanted water, and he started aspirating on water. And this was about the fourth day, fifth day we were in there. The doctor suggested that we either nothing at all, or we do the thickening liquid or something like that, even if it's just to get him taste. So about the fourth, fifth day, you're looking at anything I was putting in his mouth strictly was just to wet and give him taste. I started noticing the speech was even worse. The only things that he could really say was yes or no, and those were becoming a struggle at that point. And like I said, that rocking, like he would be sleeping. Eventually, what they had did was there's a medicine called Versacet. I believe I'm saying it correctly, but
First head.
the Versacet, yeah. Basically, he was on a drip for that, and he was on 10 times the amount that they give a normal person who gets a colonoscopy, basically. He was on 10 times the amount, and that's the only thing that we found that relaxed him. And then, and I will butcher this name, Delalan, there
Mhm.
you go. He ended up on a drip for it. So he had two drips going on, and that's the only two things that we could find that made him sleep, the combination of the two. I said, are you scared? And he said, yes. And I said, I'm going to be fine. I said, I'm going to be fine, but I'm not going to be fine if I continue to watch you hurt like this. I said, but when you're ready to go, you go. I said, I can't bear it. I can't watch you hurt anymore. So as we're going into the second week, they weighed him. He was down to 116 pounds. His cheeks were sunken in. When the doctor come in and said, I'm giving him 24 to 72 hours. And he said, um, just start telling your family so everybody can come in. Because during all this, they've had to suction him out, do all that stuff. And anyways, so we got family, and luckily everybody got there to see him and everything, say their goodbyes. The hardest thing that I went through that day, it was on the day he passed. When we went to hospice, he told me three people that he wanted me to call, and that was my mother, his sister, and his pastor. His pastor was out of town. Finally, his pastor came in. His pastor came in that day he passed, actually. And when he came, him, his sister, and my mother, they were all in the same room together. We prayed, we did everything, did all that stuff, and talked, and then he left. 2 hours later, me and my mom are sitting there, each side of him, just talking to him because he's not verbal at this point. He's just laying there. He's grunting and he's moaning, but he's just laying there. And then he starts, all the secretions are coming out of him, out of his mouth. And if it wouldn't have been for me and my mama being there, he probably would have choked on it, to be honest. So we got the nurse in, we got everything cleaned out. We're, doing everything we can to get anything off of him. They've suctioned him out and stuff. And the nurse looked at me and says, you need to call your family in. This was at 3:15, and 10 minutes after 5, my husband died. I have a friend of mine, I call her my HD sister, Heather. She lives in South Mississippi. We've never physically met, but we talk on the phone, we message each other. And I was messaging her during the whole thing, and I told her, I said, I was prepared for my husband to be bedridden. I was prepared to have to hand feed him. Like, my husband was still feeding himself before we went. It wasn't the most perfect thing. Was he making messes? Yes. But I was prepared to that be our life for a couple of months. Bedridden. I have to feed him. I have to physically change him. He couldn't get up and use the bathroom no more. when you read the research and everything on the internet, that's like what I expected. But I went through that in 2 weeks. And when I asked why, the hospice doctors, they didn't have the answer because they never been around HD or seen HD.
Where did that whole time frame go? Like time is such a thief and it's so confusing at
Yeah.
times. Like it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But
Yeah.
I think that what's interesting is I had a similar story with my mom. She was a little incontinent towards the end, the last 6 months of her life, but she definitely was talking and had a shake the day before she passed. And I think that same with HD, the symptoms and the way they respond to medication is so individualized and so complex. And so is death. Like
Yeah.
their deaths, like every story seems to be different. And I think
Mhm.
that's across the board reality, at least for the people I've done hospice care for many years. And so it's always pretty different or a little bit of a range. But I think with HD, it's even more different. Like
Yeah.
you can hear one person's story, and that's one person's story. And I think that in saying that, it makes it very hard to prepare for,
Yeah.
right? So like you were a person completely prepared for all that HD could throw at you until something snuck up on you and you had no idea that you needed to prepare for that. There was nothing out there saying it could look like this towards the end and it could look
Mhm.
like this. It was just a streamline of this is what to expect. And I
Mhm.
think the importance of your story is one, it's beautiful and it shows a lot of different topics that I think we should probably explore at another date. But your end of life journey, though short, was something that I feel like some people would be grateful for. Not to say that you should be in any way, shape, or form, but more of I think your husband heard you. I think he heard you saying that you don't want to watch him suffer. You don't want to see him in pain. And I think that there's a lot of strength in speaking what's on your heart and your mind to somebody at the end stage of HD
Yeah.
because they're in there, they can hear you, they understand you. And I think it's really part of them being able to let go, being able to say, okay, she's going to be better if she's not watching me suffer,
Yeah.
if she's not watching me in pain. And I think that was beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us
Thank
today.
you. Yeah, that's where I'm at now. What does a somebody asked me when I was trying to find clothes for a funeral, and is what do you want to wear? What does a 42-year-old widow wear to a funeral? What do I wear? But people said, "What do you want to do? What do you want to do now?" I'm like, "What are people my age doing right now?" Because I basically have went through what some of my friends won't go through another 50 years from now.
Yeah. You're right. I was 38 when my husband died, 38-year-old widow. And they're like, oh, we have these grief groups. And I'm like, what am I supposed to go sit with a whole bunch of 95-year-old people?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. That's what like, and that's like when people ask me like, "What are you?" I'm like, I don't know. I don't know many people my age that have lost a loved one, and there's a few, and but they're already moved on with their life. I still try to. I'm wanting to. One thing I always, especially when we're in hospice, they would say, "Let us do it. You stop doing it." I've been in such I've been in so much control of his life for so long. So when we got in hospice, I had to learn to let go just to enjoy the moments I still had with him. And eventually I did, but it was really hard to let go of control. And now I still find myself wanting to control situations because I've had such control of my life
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
long. For like 10 years, I had control of the situation I'm in. And now I'm in this situation I have no control over. And I'm struggling with that.
Yeah.
And caregiving is an identity. It's our identity. It consumes our world and our days and our nights and our thoughts and our hearts. And it is all encompassing of an identity. And not that's our only identity, but it is a major piece of our identity.
I think the one thing about HD, end of life HD, is expect the unexpected. It's you don't know how this is going to go, and there's no way for you to prepare for it. There are things that of course, if your loved one wants a brain donation, you need to start that process now. You can do their paperwork for their brain donation right now while they are healthy, working, driving. I could do a brain donation as a healthy control for HD. Right now, I could fill out paperwork. Those little things is how we prepare, right? We can, if a brain donation wants to happen, and Ashley talked about plots, you can buy your plot of land, those kind of things. But as far as getting yourself prepared for the end of life of HD, I don't think you can. And it's going to hurt no matter what way it goes, because we are losing the people we love the most. But one thing you said is it was an honor for me to take care of my husband.
Yeah, I would do it, and I tell this to everybody, I would do it all over again. If it's to go back and start all over, if it's to go to start where we ended, I would do it. And that's one thing I always told him is we can't help what we're dealt with in life when it comes to being sick or things of that nature. And I told him, you didn't ask for this, and it shouldn't determine your relationships you have with other people. Timothy came in my life for a reason, and he taught me to love. He taught me to love myself. I will continue to always advocate for him and honor Timothy's story and honor his life and tell our future grandkids of him and how important he was, and his true example of his testimony for Huntington's disease.
I think I would have got along very well with your husband.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think we can wrap the show. Everyone, love your loved ones a little more, because we never know when it's going to be our last day with them. And until then, you guys, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel and ring the bell for notifications when more videos like this come out. Until next time.